there's something wrong with that person, and that would be me. So then the question would be, well, what variety of things could be wrong with Dr. Peterson? That's a very long list, but the ones that might come...
That's actually a better subtitle than that.
Terrific title.
Yeah. So what happened was, I objected to the radical left. That was my perspective. But the people who objected to me, or who were even critical of me or curious about me, thought, okay, well, if Peterson isn't part of the left, then where the hell is he? And the answer could be, well, anywhere on the political spectrum, including Nazi. And of course, that's hypothetically true. And if I was a Nazi, then that would be really useful for all the radical leftists, because if you're a Nazi, as Douglas has already pointed out, we've already decided that you're a bad person. And if I was a bad person, then no one would have to listen to me. And so it was in the interests of the radicals whose positions I was disputing to cast me as a Nazi. But it was also a reasonable cognitive maneuver, because there was some possibility, although it's infinitesimal given the tiny proportion of actual Nazis in our society, that I would in fact be one and have gotten away with hiding that at 2 major universities for 25 years. And also, at that point, I had 250 hours of my lectures on YouTube, which was basically every word, in essence, that I ever uttered to a student since 1993, and a huge part of that actually consisted of very trenchant criticisms of Nazis. So it was difficult to pin that on me. But to give my critics credit, they had their reason for vilifying me. And the reason was, if you object, you might be a villain. Okay, so that's steel man number one. I'm not at least the kind of villain they think I am, although I might be some other kind of villain altogether. So then the next steel man issue is, the left has a place. Okay, so why? Well, here's why. In order to act properly in the world, you have to do things. Everyone agrees on that. And to do things, you have to do them in the social world. You have to cooperate and compete with other people. And when you cooperate and compete with other people in the service of valid goals, valuable goals, productive goals, you produce hierarchies. You produce hierarchies of competence and hierarchies of power. Those aren't exactly the same thing. But either way, you produce hierarchies, and hierarchies dispossess people. They dispossess people because the spoils go to a few. That's the problem of the unequal distribution of wealth. And because in any hierarchy of competence, a small number of people do most of the creative work. And these are ironclad laws. Okay, so the problem with hierarchies are necessary. But the problem with hierarchies is they produce dispossession. And the left, in principle, speaks for the dispossessed. And someone has to speak for the dispossessed. And so when the lefties look at me and they say, well, Dr. Peterson is always speaking about the necessity of hierarchies, and how can we be sure that he's not trying to justify them in their current position and obscure the fact that they tend towards tyranny and deception, which they clearly do? How do we know that he's just not reifying the present power structure for his own aims? And why should we trust him? And that's a perfectly valid objection. Now, I believe it happens to be wrong, because I understand the downside of hierarchies, and I also think I understand how to go about rectifying that. But that's why they're objecting, insofar as they're playing a straight political game, and not some ideological form of grandiose behavior.